The massive space station hung in the darkness between stars like a metal flower, waiting to bloom with violence and death. 47 transport ships had gathered around it over the past 3 days, and each one carried something terrible inside. Its hull, the Galactic Tribunal had sent out the summons 6 months ago, and every spacefaring civilization knew what it meant. The Plikenid Apex Games were beginning again. Every 100 years, the greatest predators from every inhabited world would gather to fight and kill, and prove which species deserved to lead the galaxy for the next century. It was an ancient tradition older than most of the civilizations that now participated in it. Ambassador Vorix of the Kalendi Federation stood in the observation deck and watched the ships arrive one by one. His 7 eyes tracked each vessel with the careful attention of someone who had seen 3 of these competitions before. He knew what kinds of nightmares those ships were carrying. The first to dock was the vessel from Kethver Prime, and Vorix felt his tentacles curl inward with instinctive fear. Everyone knew what the Kethver had sent Silex. The unending was 12 meters of muscle and scale and venom that could eat through the hull of a battleship. The serpentine creature had won the last Apex Games and the one before that, and no one had figured out how to kill it yet. The Kethver would hold the prime seat for another century if something did not change. The second ship came from the frozen hell, world of Mordith 9, and it carried something that did not have a name. The other species simply called it the Silence, because no prey had ever survived long enough to scream when it attacked. Even the Tribunal scientists did not know exactly what it looked like, because their cameras always seemed to fail at the crucial moment. Vorix shuddered and turned away from the viewport. More ships arrived throughout the day. The Chidex Hive world sent a swarm mind of 10,000 razor-winged hunters that moved as one perfect organism. The Olith sent a creature of living shadow that fed on fear itself. The Grenic sent an acid-spitting horror with 17 legs and a mouth that never stopped moving. Species had reached into the darkest corners of their evolutionary history and pulled out the most terrible thing they could find. This was the way of the Apex Games. You did not send warriors or soldiers or champions. You sent monsters. Vorix had counted 46 arrivals when the last ship finally appeared on the sensors. It was small compared to the others, and it bore the simple blue and green markings of a world that had only joined the galactic community. 50 years ago, Vorix felt all 7 of his eyes blink in sequence. Humanity was new and strange, and no one quite knew what to make of them. They were soft creatures with no natural weapons to speak of. No claws or fangs or venom or armor. They could not see in the dark or breathe underwater or survive in vacuum by every measure. They should have been prey rather than predators, and yet something about them made the older species nervous in ways they could not explain. Human ship docked with a gentle thump, and Vorix made his way down to the arrival bay along with several dozen other ambassadors and observers. Everyone wanted to see what Earth had brought to the games. Airlock cycled through its safety protocols, and the inner door began to slide open. Vorix leaned forward with anticipation. A woman walked out first. She was average height for a human with dark hair pulled back from her tired face, and she wore simple civilian clothes rather than any kind of combat gear. She was holding the hand of a very small human. Vorix blinked again. The small human appeared to be a juvenile of the species. It was perhaps 3 feet tall with a round face and chubby limbs, and it was already making a high-pitched noise that seemed to indicate distress. The juvenile had apparently not been allowed to bring its favorite blanket on the journey, and this injustice was more than it could bear. Woman sighed and looked at the gathered aliens with an expression that suggested she had not slept well in several days. "I am Dr. Sarah Chun," she said in clear galactic standard. "And this is Marcus." She gestured at the small screaming human. "He is Earth's entry in the Apex Games." The silence that followed was broken only by the continued wailing of the child. Vorix felt his tentacles twitch with confusion. There must be some mistake, he said. No mistake, Doctor. Chun replied. She reached down and picked up the juvenile, who immediately began squirming and kicking in her arms. Marcus, say hello to the nice aliens. Marcus did not say hello. Marcus threw his head back and screamed. Even louder, one of the Greenwich delegates made a sound of disgust and turned away. This is an insult, it hissed through its many mouths. The humans mock us with this weakness. Perhaps they misunderstood the rules, another ambassador suggested. Someone should explain to them that this is a combat competition. Dr. Chun shifted Marcus to her other hip and smiled in a way that did not reach her eyes. We understood the rules perfectly, she said. Each world sends its deadliest hunter. And you sent an infant. We sent a toddler. Chun corrected. There is a difference. Vorax did not see how that difference mattered, but he decided not to press the point. The child will be killed in the first round, he said instead. Your species will be humiliated before the entire galaxy. Perhaps. Chun said. Marcus had stopped screaming and was now staring at Vorax with large wet eyes. Then the child reached out one chubby hand and grabbed one of the ambassador's tentacles. Squishy, Marcus announced with evident delight and squeezed. Vorax yelped and yanked his tentacle back. The grip had been surprisingly strong for such a small creature. Marcus, no, Chun said without much conviction. We do not grab people without asking. Marcus ignored her completely and began looking around for something else to grab. Vorax nursed his bruised tentacle and watched the small human with new wariness. The registration ceremony is in 1 hour, he said stiffly. Your entry must be present and prepared for biological scanning. We will be there, Chun promised. She turned and walked toward the quarters that had been assigned to the human delegation. Marcus watched the assembled aliens over her shoulder with bright, curious eyes. Then he stuck out his tongue at them. Vorax did not know what that gesture meant, but he suspected it was not respectful. The humans were either very brave or very foolish, or possibly both. He supposed the Apex Games would determine which one soon enough. The first 3 days of the Apex Games were dedicated to observation and analysis. The tribunal scientists needed to catalog the capabilities of each hunter before the actual combat began. This meant controlled tests and measurements and recordings that would be studied by scholars for generations to come. The hunters were released one at a time into specially designed environments filled with drones and simulated prey. Their speed was measured and their strength was calculated, and their killing methods were documented in precise detail. Shellax the Unending went first. Great Serpent destroyed 17 reinforced combat drones in under a minute, and the tribunal scientists had to pause the test because they were running out of equipment. The venom that dripped from its fangs ate through 3 layers of protective flooring before they could neutralize it. When the Kethver champion finally coiled up to rest, the observation room was filled with the sound of nervous breathing from a dozen different species. The silence went next, or at least the scientists assumed it did. Cameras in the testing chamber flickered and died one by one, and when they came back online, the simulated prey animal was already dead. No one had seen anything. Move the Chidek swarm filled an entire chamber with the sound of 1,000,000 wings and devoured an artificial ecosystem in less than an hour. The shadow creature from Ullith absorbed light itself and left patches of absolute darkness wherever it passed. Betting pools opened on the second day, and humanity was given odds of 10,000 to 1. Most species did not even bother to place wagers against them. It would have been like betting on which direction water would flow. Everyone knew the human child would die. Dr. Sarah Chun spent those 3 days in a constant state of exhausted anxiety. Marcus did not understand where he was or why he was there. He only knew that everything was strange and nothing was familiar, and his mother kept trying to make him do things he did not want to do. He refused to eat the nutrition paste that the station provided because it was not the right color. He screamed for 20 minutes because his juice was in the wrong cup. He knocked over a display case full of priceless artifacts because there was a shiny thing inside that he wanted to touch when the Mortith delegation approached to examine him. Marcus bit the ambassador on what was probably a leg. The Mortith ambassador required medical treatment. Marcus required a timeout. On the third night, Vorax found Dr. Chun sitting alone in the observation lounge while Marcus finally slept in the next room. The human woman looked like she had aged 10 years in 3 days. "You should withdraw," Vorax said, not unkindly. "There is no shame in admitting a mistake." "It was not a mistake," Chun replied. "Then your government has sentenced you both to death for reasons I cannot understand." Chun laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Ambassador, do you know why human toddlers scream the way they do?" Vorax considered the question. "Communication of distress," he suggested. "A signal to summon protective adults." "That is part of it," Chun agreed. "But the screaming serves another purpose too." She turned to look at him, and her eyes were sharp despite her exhaustion. "The frequency of a human toddler's cry is specifically designed by evolution to cause physical discomfort in adult humans," she said. "It triggers anxiety and aggression and an overwhelming need to make the sound stop by any means necessary." Vorax felt his tentacles curl. "You are saying the sound is a weapon. I am saying that human children have been perfecting that weapon for millions of years." Chun said. "Every generation the children who screamed louder and longer were more likely to survive, and every generation the screaming got worse." She smiled grimly. "Marcus has not napped today, and he missed his afternoon snack, and someone in dining hall thought it would be funny to give him concentrated sugar." In the next room something thumped. Then something else crashed. Then Marcus began to crouch and stood up with the weary resignation of someone who had done this 1,000 times before. "The testing rounds begin tomorrow," she said. "Your scientists want to observe Marcus in a controlled environment. What will he do?" Vorax asked. "Whatever he wants," Chun said. "That is rather the point." The testing chamber had been designed to withstand the most dangerous predators in the galaxy. It had walls that could resist plasma fire and floors that could absorb kinetic impacts and air filters that could neutralize any known toxin. None of that mattered. Marcus spent the first hour running in circles because running in circles was fun then. He discovered that the gravity plating made a funny sound when he jumped on. Eyes began jumping. The tribunal scientists watched in confused silence as the small human bounced up and down and laughed with pure joy at the noise he was creating. "Is this a hunting technique?" one of them asked. "No," said Dr. Chun, who was sitting in the observation room with her head in her hands. "This is just what he does." Marcus jumped for 6 hours. When he finally got bored, he found a crack in one of the wall panels and spent another hour trying to stick his fingers into it. Then he had a complete emotional breakdown because his fingers got stuck. Sound he produced during that breakdown registered on sensors 3 sectors away of the tribunal. Scientists had to leave the room because they could not handle the noise. One of them was later treated for what the medical staff described as sudden onset auditory trauma. Chun extracted Marcus from the wall panel and held him while he sobbed. "It is acceptable," Vorax heard her murmur. "You are acceptable, and I am here, and nothing bad will happen to you." Marcus hiccuped and rubbed his face against her shoulder. Then he asked for juice. The observation report that the scientists produced that evening was unlike any they had written before. The human juvenile displayed no measurable combat capabilities, they noted, but something about it made them deeply uncomfortable in ways they could not properly articulate. The arena was a masterwork of engineering that had taken 3 centuries to build it, stretched across 300 square kilometers of artificial landscape, filled with forests and mountains and rivers and caves. The environment could be adjusted to favor any type of predator, but for this competition, it had been set to a neutral standard that would give no species an advantage. The Rules were simple: all 47 hunters would be released at dawn. The last one alive would claim victory for their world. There were no other restrictions. Sarah Chun received her survival kit at sunrise. It contained water, purification tablets and emergency rations, and a small medical pack and a communication device that would let her signal for extraction. If she survived, Marcus received juice and crackers and his favorite stuffed animal, which someone had finally located in the cargo hold of their ship. He seemed satisfied with this arrangement. The transport pod deposited them in a clearing near the center of the arena and then flew away. Sarah looked around at the alien trees and unfamiliar sky and felt the full weight of their situation settle onto her shoulders. She was alone in a killing ground with her 3-year-old son. Somewhere out there were 46 of the most dangerous creatures in the known galaxy, and all of them were hunting. "Come on, sweetie," she said quietly. "We need to find shelter." Marcus was busy examining a rock. "Pretty," he announced, holding it up for her to see. "Yes, very pretty. Now we need to go." "Won't keep it." "You can keep it, but we need to move." Marcus put the rock in his pocket and allowed her to pick him up. They walked for most of the morning. Sarah avoided open areas and stuck to the dense vegetation where larger predators would have trouble maneuvering. She had studied the files on every hunter in the competition, and she knew that most of them relied on ambush tactics. If she could keep moving and stay alert, they might survive the first day. Marcus fell asleep against her shoulder around midday. The silence was almost peaceful. Then the shadow came. Sarah did not see it at first. She only noticed that the light around them was fading, even though there were no clouds in the artificial sky. The darkness crept along the ground like spilled ink, and wherever it touched, the plants wilted and died. The creature from Oloth was hunting them. Sarah's heart began to pound. She had read about this thing in the briefing documents. It fed on fear, and it could sense terror from kilometers away. The more afraid you were, the stronger it became. She was very afraid. The shadow rose up in front of them like a wave of liquid night, and Sarah could see something moving inside it, something with too many eyes and too many teeth and a hunger that had never been satisfied. This was it. This was how they died. Marcus woke up. He looked at the shadow creature with sleepy confusion. Then his face crumpled because his nap had been interrupted, and he was not ready to be awake. Yet the scream that came out of his small body was unlike anything the shadow creature had ever encountered. It was not fear, it was not pain, it was pure, undiluted toddler rage at the unfairness of the universe. The sound hit the shadow creature like a physical force. It had evolved to feed on negative emotions, but this was something different. This was chaos. This was unreason. This was a small human child who was angry about everything and nothing, and did not care who knew it. The shadow creature tried to process what it was experiencing and failed. It had consumed the terror of 1,000 prey animals, but it had no defense against weaponized tantrum. The darkness shuddered and pulled back. The eyes inside it blinked in confusion. Then the shadow creature fled. It moved faster than Sarah had ever seen anything move, and within seconds it had vanished into the trees. Marcus continued screaming for another 2 minutes because he had built up momentum and could not stop. Sarah held him and rocked him and made soothing sounds until he finally wound down. "Want Mr. Bonky?" Marcus whimpered. Sarah looked around. Stuffed animal had fallen somewhere during the encounter. She spotted it near the base of a dead tree and retrieved it. Marcus clutched Mr. Bonky to his chest and sniffled. "Scary dark thing," he said. Sarah agreed. "Very scary. Made it go away." "Yes, you did." Marcus considered this information. "Hungry," he announced. Sarah laughed. It was a slightly hysterical laugh, but it was genuine. She dug into the survival kit and found the crackers. They sat in the clearing while Marcus ate, and Sarah tried to process what had just happened. Briefing documents had said the Ullith shadow creature was nearly invincible. It had won 3 Apex games and never once retreated from prey, but it had run from a cranky toddler. Sarah thought about the other hunters out there in the arena. She thought about their carefully evolved killing techniques and their millions of years of predatory refinement, and she thought about Marcus, who had once screamed for an hour because his banana broke in half. Maybe they had a chance after all. The dual communication device buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out and saw a message from the Tribunal Observation Team, said JDOW. Creature has withdrawn from competition. It reclaims psychological damage and requests immediate extermination. Read the message twice then. She looked at Marcus, who was trying to feed a cracker to Mr. Bonky. One down. She murmured, 45. To go. Marcus looked up at her with innocent eyes. More juice. He demanded Sarah gave him more juice. The arena had never seen anything like this before. By the third day, word had spread among the hunters. Something was wrong in the arena. Something that did not follow the rules that every predator understood. The Chidek swarm was the first to actively avoid the sector where the humans had made camp. HiveMind had sent a single scout unit to investigate the strange creatures, and what it found had disturbed the entire collective. The small human had grabbed the scout because it was a pretty bug. It had squeezed too hard. The scout had died. But that was not the disturbing part. What disturbed the HiveMind was what happened after. Small human had cried, not from fear or pain, but from genuine grief at having accidentally hurt a living thing. Emotion was raw and unfiltered, and when it brushed against the collective consciousness of the swarm, every unit within 50 meters went dormant from psychic shock. Human children apparently had no emotional barriers at all. They felt everything at maximum intensity, and they broadcast those feelings without any control whatsoever. The HiveMind decided that the humans were not worth the risk. They pulled back and focused on easier prey. The silence made its move on the fourth day. It had been watching and waiting and analyzing its target. With the patience of a perfect killing machine, it understood ambush predation better than any creature in the galaxy. You studied your prey. You learned their patterns. You found the moment when they were most vulnerable. Then you struck. The silence had identified the optimal ambush point. The humans passed the same clearing every evening on their way to water. Tonight it would be waiting. It settled into position as the sun began to set. Its body became perfectly still. Its senses extended outward to detect the slightest movement. The humans approached right on schedule. The adult female was carrying the juvenile. They were tired and dirty and clearly exhausted from days of running and hiding. This would be easy. The silence prepared to strike, and then the juvenile announced that it needed to use the bathroom right now immediately. Could not wait. The adult female sighed and changed direction toward a more private area. The silence found itself watching empty space. Its ambush had been ruined by a toddler's bladder. It relocated and found the humans again near a small stream. The adult was helping the juvenile wash his hands. The juvenile did not want his hands washed. He expressed this preference at considerable volume. The silence had never heard anything like it. The sound was not just loud, it was layered with frequencies that seemed specifically designed to cause maximum discomfort. The creature tried to push through the noise and focus on its kill, but its body was not built to handle this kind of auditory assault. It began to vibrate in resonance with the screaming organs that were meant to be still started to shake. The silence had survived for centuries by making no sound at all, and now sound was destroying it from the inside. It retreated. It fled to the furthest corner of the arena and curled up in a cave and refused to move again. The observation team recorded another withdrawal. Two of the most feared hunters in the galaxy had been defeated by a 3-year-old human. The other competitors began to take notice. On day 5, the great serpent Silax encountered the humans by accident. It had been tracking a Grenix hunter through the forest when it came across their camp. The adult female saw it first and froze. The serpent was massive, 12 meters of armored scale and corded muscle. Its eyes were cold and ancient and utterly without mercy. This was a creature that had killed thousands of prey animals across dozens of worlds. It knew exactly what it was and what it could do to Juvenile. Human looked up from the stick he had been playing with. He saw the serpent. His eyes went wide. "Big snake," he said with obvious delights. "Silex." Paws prey did not usually react this way. "Won't pet it," the juvenile announced. He took a step toward the serpent. The adult female grabbed him. "No, Marcus, we do not pet the giant snake." "But want to." "I understand that you want to, but we cannot." Marcus considered this injustice. His face began to crumple. "WHY?" he demanded at maximum volume. The sound hit Silex. Like a physical blow, the serpent had faced warriors and monsters and things that would drive most creatures mad with fear, but it had never experienced anything like the emotional intensity radiating from this tiny human. It was not just the noise, it was the feeling behind it, the desperate unfairness of wanting something and being told no. Absolute conviction that this was the worst thing that ever happened to anyone. The complete inability to understand why the universe would be so cruel. Silex felt its ancient predator brain struggling to categorize what it was experiencing. This was not fight or flight. This was something else entirely. Serpent decided that discretion was the better part of valor. It turned and slithered away into the fin of it all. Forested would find easier prey elsewhere. Sarah watched it go and let out a breath she had not realized she was holding. "Juice," Marcus demanded. His tantrum had already been forgotten. "We do not have any more juice," Sarah said. Marcus stared at her. Horror in his eyes was absolute. "No juice," he whispered. "We can look for water. Want juice?" And so it began again. Somewhere in the forest, Silex heard the screaming and moved even faster. Whatever that small human was, it was not worth the effort. On the final day of the Apex Games, only 3 hunters remained. Silex, the unending, had survived through a combination of power and caution. The Chidex swarm had merged with 2 other insectoid hunters and grown into a superorganism of nearly 100,000 units, and Marcus Chen, age 3, was still alive because nothing in the arena wanted to deal with him. Sarah had not slept more than an hour at a time in 7 days. She was out of supplies and out of energy, and very nearly out of hope. Marcus had lost Mr. Bonky somewhere in the forest and had cried himself into hiccups 4 separate times before finally accepting a replacement stick as a companion. He had named it Mr. Bonky too. They were hiding in a cave near the center of the arena when the final confrontation began. Sarah heard the swarm before she saw it. The sound of a million wings filled the air like thunder. She looked up and saw the sky turn dark with flying bodies. The Chidex super swarm had decided to end the games. It descended toward their position in a wave of chitinous death. Sarah grabbed Marcus and ran. She knew it was hopeless. The swarm was everywhere. There was nowhere to hide and nowhere to flee, and the only thing left was to die with whatever dignity she could manage. Marcus looked up at the approaching swarm. His tired little eyes went wide. "Birdies," he said. Sarah kept running. "Look, Mama," Marcus said with growing excitement. So many birdies. He did not understand that they were about to die. He did not know that the swarm was a killing machine that had devoured entire ecosystems. All he knew was that the sky was full of flying things, and flying things were wonderful. "Birdies," Marcus screamed, but it was not a scream of fear. It was a scream of pure, overwhelming joy. The happiness that erupted from his small body was so intense and so genuine that it hit the hive mind like a supernova. The swarm had evolved to process negative emotions. Fear made it faster, pain made it stronger, anger made it more aggressive, but joy, pure unfiltered toddler joy at seeing something beautiful. The hive mind had no framework for this. The happiness crashed through its collective consciousness like a tidal wave. Units began dropping from the sky as their neural links overloaded. The swarm tried to pull back and regroup, but the damage was spreading too fast. Marcus was laughing. Now he was reaching up toward the falling bugs and clapping his hands with delight. Every clap sent another pulse of weaponized happiness. Through the swarm half, the superorganism hit the ground before the hive mind managed to retreat it, fled to the far side of the arena, dragging its stunned and twitching components behind it. Sarah stood in a field of fallen insects and stared at her son. Marcus picked up one of the dazed bugs and examined it carefully. "Pretty," he said. Then he sneezed, and the bug flew out of his hands. Thought this was HFY attacked while they were distracted. The great serpent had been watching from the shadows, and it knew this was its best chance. It struck with all the speed and power that had made it champion of 100 hunts, 12 meters of killing intent, aimed directly at the small human child. Sarah screamed. Marcus looked up, and then something strange happened. Marcus had been awake for too long, and he had walked too far, and he had experienced too many emotions in too short a time. His tiny body had finally reached its absolute limit. And when a human toddler hits that limit, there is only one possible response: complete and total system shutdown. Marcus went limp, not partially limp, but entirely limp. Every muscle in his body relaxed at once, and he dropped like a HFY's strike passed through the space where his head had been a fraction of a second earlier. The serpent's momentum carried it forward into the cave wall. Rocks fell, dust exploded. Before the mighty predator could recover, Marcus began to flail. This was not coordinated resistance. This was the wild, uncontrolled thrashing of a toddler in the grip of the ultimate tantrum. He kicked and punched and bit and screamed. Every movement was random. Every strike was unpredictable. HFY had never faced anything like it. Serpent tried to coil around its prey, but Marcus kept squirming free. It tried to strike, but Marcus was never where it expected him to be, and then Marcus headbutted the serpent directly in what it probably used as an eye. The impact was tiny. The damage was minimal, but Selax felt something it had not experienced in centuries. Doubt. This small creature could not hurt it, but it could not seem to catch the small creature either, and the noise. Terrible, terrible noise. Selax made a decision. It transmitted the formal concession to the tribunal observers. It was withdrawing from the competition. The Chidex super swarm followed moments later. It was still trying to recover from acute joy exposure and had no desire for another encounter. Apex games were over. The ceremony was held 3 days. Later, in the great hall of the tribunal station, Sarah stood before the assembled ambassadors with Marcus on her hip. Her son was trying to grab Ambassador Vorax's eye stalks, and she was trying to stop him while also listening to the High Arbiter's speech. The human victory is unprecedented. The crystalline being intoned. Never in 10,000 years has the competition been won in such a manner. He is not a non-combatant, Sarah said. He is an undefeated combatant who has not learned the rules yet. The High Arbiter considered this. Explain. It said. Sarah took a deep breath. You asked every world to send its deadliest hunter, and we did, she said. On Earth, the most dangerous predator is not the one with the biggest teeth or the sharpest claws. She looked at Marcus, who was now trying to put his entire fist in his mouth. It is the one that cannot be predicted or reasoned with or intimidated, she continued. Human toddlers have brought experienced warriors to their knees and made the strongest, most patient adults completely lose their minds. She smiled at the assembled aliens. This is what humans are like before we learn self-control, she said. Imagine what we are like after. Marcus chose that moment to look at the High Arbiter and blow a very wet raspberry. The ancient being had presided over the rise and fall of civilizations, but it had no idea how to respond to this. The prime seat, it said finally, belongs to Earth. Won't go home, Marcus announced. Me too, Sarah said. Me too. Humanity held the prime seat for the next 100 years. They never sent another toddler to the Apex Games. The other species never stopped being afraid that they might. And Somewhere in the archives of the Galactic Tribunal there remains a single notation in the file on humanity. Do not underestimate them at any age. Mr. Bonky, too, was given a place of honor in the Museum of Galactic. Mr. Marcus asked for juice at the ceremony. Some things never change.